I'm so pleased to have as our guest at Tutul Dialogues Ashish Thakur. Ashish is an MA in counseling in mental health and wellness from New York University. His major areas of study and skill set and expertise include depression, trauma work, grief, loss, bereavement, suicidology, childhood issues, and counseling individuals who identify as gay or lesbian. Narrative therapy, psychodynamic and psychoanalytical approaches, dialectical behavior therapy, paths work, and transaction analysis are some of the modalities used by him in his individual psychotherapeutic work. He's worked with the Mind Temple Clinic as a mental health counselor since November 2017. Ashish is an accomplished public speaker and has conducted mental health workshops for a large number of MNCs, premier educational institutes, and NGOs. Humor, storytelling, and positive psychology and relatable interventions are an integral part of programs that he's facilitated. He's also contributed to Dr. Anjali Chhabria's book, Death is Not the Answer, and Surviving During a Pandemic. His work has also been published in an international journal. Before his transition to mental health, he obtained an MBA in Human Resources from the KJ Somaya Institute in Mumbai. I've known Ashish for many years and I know that he does stellar work with great depth, intensity, and sensitivity. And I'm so glad to the fact that he's agreed to come and speak to us and on the Tutul Dialogues. Hello, Ashish. My first question is, you work in the area of grief and loss, bereavement, depression, suicide. These are words, each word has, such strong connotations for all of us. How did you choose to get into doing work with people who are facing these aspects? So tell us a little bit about how you got into psychology.
So I come from a business family and then worked in the fashion industry. But I think it was the terror attacks in Mumbai that got me thinking about what from here, what is the purpose of my life? Where am I coming and where am I going? I think it was after those terror attacks where one witnessed the crazy destruction of life that I asked myself that if 12 people of the wrong belief system could wreak such havoc, why could 12 people of the right belief system not create a ripple effect of the opposite nature? I think it started with me working with non-profit organizations that worked with individuals, specifically children and adolescents that came from the lesser socioeconomic or lower socioeconomic strata of society. I think there I got exposed to the issues that were buried under the surface of human life, human existence. Issues like depression, issues like anxiety, issues like grief, loss, bereavement, issues where a life issue defined the question of do I want to continue living life or do I want to give up on life via suicide? So I would network with a lot of mental health professionals, and my professional mentor, Dr. Anjali Chhabria, would offer pro bono services, to these people who I took to her and who she sent her team to. And it is sitting in those consultations that I realized that the power and impact would have, that counseling could have on human beings. Because the process would serve like this mirror for them. And I'd like to quote an analogy, Sujata. Your eyelashes and eyebrows are so close to your eyes and you can't see them.
Exactly.
You need a mirror. That counseling session, that psychotherapeutic interaction would serve as that mirror to be able to get the person to see that was so close to him or her, but not able to see. I may take a more philosophical approach to this conversation and this question, that it also became the means to be able to light that spark of hope that you are not equal to your condition if there was a diagnosis, or you are not equal to what you feel right now.
You're much more than that.
I think an individual's inner belief system guides his or her outside work. So externally, I may use psychological modalities, We have CBT, trauma-focused interventions. We have human-centered interactions. But an individual in my profession, his or her inner belief, I believe, guides the external narrative that they take, whether in work, whether in life, whether with their families, whether with their children, whether with the professionals who they interact with. The outside is a continuation of the inside.
It is my impression that the non-profit sector as well as psychology, there are, I think, many more women than men. And leaving fashion, the business, and then getting into this, what was your experience navigating this world as a man? Was it any different? Did you notice a few things differently? Were you different?
So, interesting that you made that observation, Sujata, because you're right. A large amount of the non-profit space, when it comes to the non-corporate angle or the non-admin angle or the non-business angle, the people who work grassroots, very few men. Similarly, psychology, I mean, it's a ratio of 90 to 10. I studied at NYU and I thought the US would be different, but the ratio was similar, 85 to 15. And when I worked with the nonprofit space, I worked with children and adolescents who came from the absolute lower socioeconomic rungs of society, where for them, male behavior was characterized by physical abuse, verbal abuse, sexual abuse, abrasive and aggressive behavior, a lack of sensitivity. And I don't mean to in any way come across as arrogant or narcissistic when I say this, but I remember my first performance eval that came, and my supervisor, my peer mentor when I was with this nonprofit said, Ashish, the boys have said, we haven't seen gentle male behavior like Ashish Bhaiya. So, when we work in that space, the children refer to us as Didi and Bhaiya, And they were in anticipation, let's see when this male behavior changes to what we know. Mm-hmm. And when that 360 happened and the children wrote in their comments, their surprise at male behavior having the potential and possibility of being gentle, caring, affectionate, compassionate, embracing. That became my inroad of starters, and I didn't even know that, to counseling, because then the male children and the adolescents would want to sort of spend time with me and say, Ashish Bhaiya, can I talk to you? Okay, can we walk back with you to the car? That's how counseling happened. When it came to actual practice, I think there's a dearth of male counselors in Mumbai, in India, and I think across the world. And very many number of times the requests that come to the clinic, Mind Temple, where I work with, are we want to see the male counselor.
Oh, I see.
Sometimes by men because they feel super uncomfortable about opening up to a female counselor. But sometimes with women who don't want to open up to a female counselor, sometimes because of fear of judgment. So it's been an interesting journey being a man. I don't mean to be sexist when I say this, but in a woman-dominated arena. And I must also acknowledge this, that I have learned so much from my female colleagues, my female cohort, my peers at NYU, my female professors, that I don't think as a man I would inherently be sensitive to or sensitized to.
Maybe a couple of unique examples that you can talk about.
I think patience. I think the ability to listen. I think the ability to embrace, which is very critical in a profession like mine. And being a man, I have often, and maybe the men are going to throw stones at me for this, but that's okay. I think patience may be a virtue, and I don't mean to generalize, that may have to be an acquired construct for men, or the art of acceptance and embracement. Of course, on the other side, sometimes I have also observed and shared with the women in my life in very many capacities. Don't go to the other extreme that you forbear to the point where you are compromising on yourself.
Absolutely.
Because that's the other risk of patience, embracement, acceptance. But I have learned that from the woman in my life. I've also learned how not to give up.
Patient but not giving up.
Absolutely. Because patience, I think, in India is misconstrued as the Saas Bahu serials that we see, where the daughter-in-law suffers and continues to suffer till the TRP ratings drop and the show goes off air. But patience as the construct to be able to continue, but also know when it is time to draw the line and boundary and not compromise on the self. Just my limited take-backs from the woman in my life.
Ashish, I remember early days of getting into, either an organization or for young adults. There's a lot of adjusting we are doing based on who we are and what's the environment like, and it's an interesting phase. All of us go through it. I think I also struggled with it in my own ways. What would be your advice to young adults and especially those who work in very high pressure, demanding jobs? What's your advice to them based on what you see them getting struggling with?
Observations that I've had with young professionals, irrespective of what profession they may be in, they'll end up making an opinion about a situation equal to their belief about themselves.
Okay.
And I'll elaborate on that. A performance appraisal not met by my standards, And yes, you've said yes to everything when you're in that room with your seniors. You've left that room. And that opinion shared about you, about that duration of time, that 1 year, that 6 months, whatever the time duration, that performance appraisal rating then begins to become their belief of themselves. And I'll give you an example of that. It's almost like when we were in school, there was one midterm exam and I didn't do as well, or I even flunked. Today, in hindsight, when I look back, did that one midterm exam impact the rest of my life or the rest of my career? No. But did I land up making that opinion or even that immediate reality of that point of time that I flunked equal to my belief system of me? I'm a failure, I'm not good enough, I can't do these things, my life is doomed. You internalize that performance appraisal and then you begin to believe that about yourself. Now that's what a lot of young professionals do. And that, instead of becoming just a stumbling block, a blip, becomes the wall that I hold against myself, that I wall myself into. So my advice to young professionals is self-reflect, don't self-destroy. There's a difference between self-reflection, which is such a critical aspect, versus self-destruction. Because you self-destroy, you begin to change your entire narrative about yourself based on that one event. young people who tend to kind of consistently examine and re-examine their why seem to be a lot more aware of their how.
Those that know the why can all bear almost anyhow.
Absolutely.
And there's another one which I use, which the students I teach like very much, about Viktor Frankl. Let me see if I can remember it. But it goes like this: that when you cannot change things around you, then you're forced to focus on changing yourself.
Absolutely.
And for some reason, they always quote that. And when I ask them what is it that you've learned or remember from the last session, they always quote this. I think it's sometimes when the outside world doesn't make sense, then sometimes you look inward and say, I think I need to bring about a change. Is there anything else you'd like to talk about in terms of insight for young professionals? And then we'll move to more mature and senior professionals.
Absolutely. And just before I go to them, I am reminded of my own spiritual mentor who I've been very inspired by, who says, you can only change yourself, you cannot change other people. And for myself, I take back that I have in control to whatever degree. My life, my choices, my actions, my reactions. I do not have in my control someone else's choices, actions, reactions, responses. So I'm going to exert whatever I can in terms of thought, word, action, deed, attitude on what I can control. So I'm going to take that to the next bit, that I've also observed a very large number of young professionals tend to focus on what they cannot control. Yes, it is human nature to want to know, to want to control. But my inputs to them very often is, are you spending far too much time, focus, attention on what you cannot control, that you forget to focus on what you can? In continuation to that, I think something else that one has observed in young professionals is comparison.
Yes, absolutely.
And there's a quote, I don't remember the author or the source of this quote, but this person says, comparison is self-destruction. Because I don't have in my control the other person's narrative. For comparison, the laws of physics says all circumstances have to be the same.
Exactly.
Even two twins are not the same. Conceived possibly at the same time, born of the same parents, delivered one after the other, or they ought to be, but they're not. And if you have to compare with someone or something, compare with yourself what you were yesterday. Because when we were growing up, our caregivers, our parents measured our heights at the back of the doors and then compared it with our own height 6 months later.
Exactly.
Not with that of my sibling or my friend. Asking oneself, what is the purpose of comparison? Is it to get inspired? Or is it to self-deprecate? Going back again, what is the purpose of that activity?
I think inspiration and not comparison, I think is a wonderful way of looking at it. What are some of the things that you'd like to give as insights and suggestions for senior professionals who have perhaps completed the domestic part, buying a house, and then they are really working very hard and doing 14-hour days and having very busy, overscheduled lives? What's your advice to them?
In my work with senior leadership, and because these are one-on-one interactions that are completely confidential, there are 2 or 3 things that I have observed. They have started possibly at the base of Maslow's need hierarchy theory, which is basic needs, roti, kapda, makan. And they may have today reached right up to self-actualization. But because of their inherent background, backdrop, circumstances of life, a certain number of them may still be stuck emotionally at the first level of Maslow's need hierarchy, which is roti, kapda, makan, or the second, which is safety, security, needs, The examination of oneself. Where am I and what mindset am I operating out of? Am I still operating out of the mindset of the first level of Maslow's need hierarchy at the second level when I'm actually at self-actualization? I think the second thing is a very large number of senior professionals land up making their role, their position, equal to their identity. So CEO becomes me, CFO becomes me, whatever apex positions become me, without realizing that one facet of my life doesn't make up the whole of me. A diamond is not a diamond only because of one facet. There are so many other facets that need to be polished, that need to be, before the whole diamond can be set in that solitaire ring. I also encourage senior professionals to ask themselves, why do I land up making that CFO equal to the whole of me? CEO equal to the whole of me, my work equal to my whole identity. Is it because I'm trying to run away from something? Is it that I haven't found my identity in other areas of life, as a husband, as a wife, as a mother, as a father, as a individual who can contribute to other people's lives? I think senior professionals need to examine the why based on where they are, not based on where I started up with.
I remember this poem, which is, if you're feeling very important, you take a bucket of water and put your hand in it, and then take your hand out and see if it makes any difference. And someone once told me, it takes, if you look at the president of USA, which is a large role, somebody asked, how many days does it take to replace someone, there's procedurally, and you're fairly dispensable. We are, and I, by equating my identity with who I am, with the role I do, I am limiting myself. I see a lot of people these days, and one of my mentors always says that you must tap into something artistic or something different, very different from the work you do, to remain relevant. And I think that's a direction a lot of people are trying to get into. But yes, I think that's a big challenge. My last question is, how do we know when we need professional help? There are days I'm going through crisis at work, or I'm going through what I feel is depression, or I've gone through a very big event which has caused a lot of trauma, and all of us go through it. How does one know when one needs help? Sometimes you talk to a sibling or a friend, but I seem to be, you're under a dark cloud. So what's the way you know, and how does the counselor know whether you do need some help?
And Sujata, before I respond to that, there was a very interesting word you used. We're all trying to stay relevant. Art, self-care. The reason why a number of senior professionals after retirement find themselves completely lost is because they have focused only on that one facet. They have not explored the other facets of their lives. So staying relevant to yourself comes with exploring those facets of your life. Because you were relevant to the organization 3 months ago. Today you're retiring or retired. You're no longer relevant there. But are you relevant to yourself?
Exactly.
So coming to when is the right time to seek professional help, I often tell people, you are your biggest smoke alarm.
Okay.
Your body is your biggest smoke alarm. And we encourage people to watch out for 3 factors: intensity, frequency, duration. Of what? Now, very often people say, oh, it's just a bad day. Sure, we all have bad days. My question is, has that bad day turned into a week or a month. So the first thing that we ask people is what I call housekeeping questions. How's your sleep been? Are you sleeping enough? Do you feel you're sleeping but I've not slept when I've woken up? Do you feel not rested when I wake up? Do you feel sleepy all through the day? The other is, do you experience anxiety? And a number of people, in India, different socioeconomic stratas may not relate to anxiety, and I'll ask them in Hindi. आपको घबराहट महसूस होती है क्या? And they immediately go, yes. It's that dirty feeling that you have before an exam.
Yes.
This pit in the stomach and that
Yes.
sinking, and the hands and legs may be shaking, perspiration. The other thing that we would ask is, how's your appetite? Because if there is the beginning of an emotional challenge, your appetite, you'll either be overeating or your appetite will drop. And then we'll ask people, how has your mood been? Has it been neutral? Has it been low? Has it been high? Has it been between neutral to high or neutral to low?
Okay.
Or oscillating between low and high? And a very critical check-in at that time is also, have you had any anger outbursts? Or have you had any crying episodes? For no rhyme or reason, I burst out into tears. No rhyme or reason, someone said something minuscule and the tears started. Or the family says, what's wrong with you? You've been sparking off at every little thing. This is not usual behavior. So your body is your immediate smoke alarm, sleep disturbances, appetite disturbances, mood fluctuations. I'm suddenly isolating.
I think there are many takeaways from today's dialogue. I think the first one is that, and the example you gave of a man who is gentle and sensitive, and how different it is for people to experience that. I think men have tremendous capacity for generosity. My father was a very generous and sensitive person, and so I expect everyone to be that way. But I think it doesn't matter whether you're a man or a woman. It's about really being human and being sensitive, and how that can make such a difference. Because for a young boy who's been beaten and abused, to listen to someone who's a man and yet who's sensitive would have been such a unique experience. The other wonderful thing you said was about comparison. Comparison should be a source of inspiration and not something that you destruct. The other thing I loved what you said is that young adults should not let a certain incident define their self-worth. This is just a blip, and I think zooming out and looking at your life holistically, you suddenly feel much better. It's like climbing a mountain, huffing and puffing, but when you look back, you realize what distance you've come. The other thing I heard you say, which was really powerful, is that if 12 people can cause damage, 12 people with evil intent can cause damage, 12 people with good intent can cause so much good. And that we can't allow, we have many facets to ourselves, and we can't allow an incident or something that I've gone through like depression or any of the things to define who a person is. And lastly, you may have reached a certain level of maturity and growth, but there are certain things which have not been resolved which are holding us back, and that's when we get overwhelmed and limited to doing one thing.
This is something specific to all levels, young professionals or senior. Don't make the cake so heavy that the plate cracks. And here my reference is, don't make the cake so heavy that the plate cracks. The other thing is, we've always learned, strike when the iron is hot. But when it comes to human interaction, especially when there is what I'd like to use a psychological word, state of hyperarousal, whether it's anger or panic, don't strike when the iron is hot. Wait for the iron to cool down. Strike when the iron is cold when it comes to emotions. Because
Wow.
when iron is hot, you can break it.
That's right.
There is no putting it back together again.
Yes.
Hence, strike when the iron is cold. I just wanted to
That's
share
very
that
neat.
bit.
Strike when the iron is cold. That's very interesting. Is there anything that you would like to ask me?
I wonder, in your experience, because you work with people as well in a similar but different capacity, I was wondering, what have you observed about individuals who are responsible for groups of people? And often there is comparison between them, but a comparison, the person who manages them, which may come in the form of bias or preconceived notions. I wonder, what has your experience been?
I've observed that managers sometimes tend to label their people based on their initial experiences. And once you've been labeled, it's really hard to change that perception. And I think the biggest discussion we have about inclusive leadership or engagement comes from the fact that I feel that I am not in the in group, or I'm not the kind of person my manager wants around, and people, it's very heavy to bear that label. And I think that if there is one thing that I would tell managers and leaders is try and be neutral as much as possible. And I'd like to give the example of an MD of an organization who shared his experience, and he said that for the last few years, one of the commitments I've made to my people is that I will meet them for who they are at that point in time, which means that if I have to meet 8 people today and I have had a very good experience with that person, I am likely to meet the person with a positive bias. Or if I have not had a good experience, I'm likely to meet the person with a sort of limiting bias or negative bias. And he says, my promise to people is that I will try and hit the refresh button and meet you for who you are. And we asked him, how successful have you been? And he said, well, I've been at it for the last 3 years. And I hope I'm closer to where I was. And I think that's one thing I would say. Don't judge others and don't judge yourselves, because you're capable of doing anything at any point in time. I think that goes a long way in making workplaces happier. Ashish, it's been wonderful listening to you and hearing your insights. I think by listening to this conversation, if a few of the people watching would get some insights, knowing that don't let the size or the weight of the cake be so much that it cracks the plate. And I think the fact that you said strike when the iron is cold, not when the iron is hot, I think these are two phenomenal insights that you've shared. Thank you so much for the dialogue. We hope you will come back for more.
I hope so too, and thank you for having me.
My pleasure and my privilege to have you on this show. Thank you so much.
Thank you.